Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The intellectual odyssey of Herbert Marcuse begins in the philosophical crucible of Weimar, Germany, a landscape littered with the grand ruins of 19th century idealism. The comprehensive system of Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, which once promised a final synthesis of reason and reality, lay fractured. In its place arose a host of competing schools, each attempting to diagnose the profound sense of crisis that permeated European culture after the Great War. For young scholars seeking a philosophy with the capacity to engage the world, the abstract formalism of neo-Kantianism offered little solace, while the inherited certainties of classical liberalism seemed entirely disconnected from the violent political realities of the day. It was within this environment of intellectual searching that Marcuse first turned toward Freiburg and the revolutionary philosophical project of Martin Heidegger. Heidegger's 1927 magnum opus, Being and Time, appeared to offer a radical departure. It promised a return to the fundamental questions of existence, moving away from abstract systems and toward a rigorous examination of the concrete, lived experience of the human being, a being Heidegger termed Dasein. The appeal for Marcuse was immediate and powerful. Here was a philosophical method, phenomenology, inherited and transformed from its creator Edmund Husserl, that took seriously the texture of everyday life, anxiety, and the confrontation with mortality. It felt like the beginning of a truly concrete philosophy, one that could potentially ground a new understanding of human freedom and historical agency. Marcuse enrolled as a student under Heidegger, hoping to forge a path that could unite this profound existential analysis with a theory of social and historical transformation. This ambition culminated in his 1932 habilitation thesis, a work titled Hegel's Ontology and the Theory of Historicity. This text represents far more than a simple academic exercise. It is a brilliant and subtle act of philosophical synthesis and critique. Marcuse's central project was to rescue Hegel from the dominant interpretations that portrayed him as a panlogical idealist, a philosopher of pure abstract thought. Instead, Marcuse delved into Hegel's earlier writings, particularly those from his Jena period, to reveal a thinker deeply concerned with the concepts of life, labor, and the dynamic movement of history. He argued that Hegel's concept of Geist, or spirit, was a description of the collective life process of humanity as it unfolds through concrete social and political struggles. In executing this reinterpretation, Marcuse was mounting a direct challenge to the prevailing academic view of Hegel. More profoundly, he was constructing a veiled but devastating critique of his own mentor, Heidegger. While Heidegger spoke of the historicity of Dasein, this concept remained a formal, ontological structure of individual existence. It described how a person is thrown into a world and projects a future, yet it remained curiously detached from the actual, material history of societies, economies, and power structures. By rereading Hegel as a philosopher of collective historical life, Marcuse was implicitly highlighting a crucial deficiency in Heideggerian thought. He demonstrated that a genuine theory of historicity required an account of the objective, social forces that shape human experience. A philosophy that remained at the level of individual existence, however profound, was ultimately incapable of providing the tools for a critique of society itself. The year 1932 proved to be the definitive turning point in Marcuse's intellectual development. It was in this year that he encountered and reviewed a set of texts that had been almost entirely unknown for nearly a century: Karl Marx's economic and philosophic manuscripts of 144. The discovery was an epiphany. In Marx's early writings, Marcuse found the missing link that connected the philosophical problem of alienation to the concrete socio-economic organization of society. The existential estrangement and anxiety that Heidegger had so brilliantly described at a philosophical level, or, in Marx's analysis, rather than the material conditions of alienated labor within a capitalist system, philosophy and social reality were fused. The problem of human existence was revealed to be a political and economic problem. This insight rendered Marcuse's philosophical allegiance to Heidegger untenable. The path of concrete philosophy led away from Freiburg and toward a critical theory of society. Heidegger's subsequent and enthusiastic embrace of the National Socialist regime in 1933 served as a tragic confirmation of Marcuse's fears. It revealed the perilous political destination of a philosophy that celebrated resolution and authenticity without a corresponding critique of the social powers that define and distort those very concepts. For Marcuse, the break was absolute. Forced to flee Germany, he found an intellectual home in 1933 at the Institute for Social Research, soon to be known as the Frankfurt School. He arrived carrying a unique and potent intellectual arsenal, a synthesis forged from Hegelian dialectics, Heideggerian phenomenology, and Marxian social analysis. This framework proved immensely valuable to the Institute's Collective project. It directly shaped the programmatic essays of the Institute's director, Max Horkheimer, who was endeavoring to define the very nature of what he termed critical theory. Marcuse supplied a philosophical depth and historical consciousness that complemented the economic and sociological work of his colleagues like Theodor Adorno and Friedrich Paulet. His early contributions helped establish the school's core mission to develop an interdisciplinary, dialectical, and materialist critique of modern society aimed at human emancipation. This initial phase of Marcuse's career was a relentless search for a theoretical foundation capable of confronting the catastrophes of the 20th century. He began with the existential question of what it means to be human in a world stripped of old certainties and ended with a framework for analyzing the social structures that constrain human possibility. His journey from Hegel through Heidegger to Marx was the essential groundwork for his entire subsequent career. It equipped him with the conceptual tools he would later use to dissect the deeper, psychological mechanisms of control operating within seemingly free societies. The next stage of his work would require another bold synthesis, one that looked beyond the factory and the state and into the hidden domain of the human psyche itself, confronting the arguments of Sigmund Freud to ask whether civilization truly demands our unhappiness. Marcuse's intellectual journey, a tapestry woven from Hegelian dialectics, Heideggerian existentialism, and Marxist materialism, culminated in a profound engagement with the human condition within the framework of advanced industrial society. His earlier work laid the groundwork for a rigorous, multifaceted critique of modern society, a critique aimed at achieving human emancipation. This foundation, built upon a deep understanding of historical materialism and the intricacies of human consciousness, prepared him for a bold confrontation with a seemingly intractable problem, the seemingly inescapable tension between civilization and individual fulfillment, a tension articulated most forcefully by Sigmund Freud. Freud, in his seminal work Civilization and its Discontents, posited a fundamental conflict between the inherent human drive for pleasure and the demands of societal order. He argued that civilization necessitates a continuous, often painful, suppression of instinctual desires, a sacrifice deemed essential for maintaining social cohesion. This pessimistic view, however, failed to fully account for the historical variability of societal structures and the potential for transformation. Marcuse, armed with his unique theoretical tools, directly challenged the seemingly immutable conclusion. His response, Eros and Civilization, stands as a landmark achievement in critical theory, a powerful rejoinder to Freud's inherent pessimism. Marcuse did not simply reject Freud's insights. Instead, he sought to refine and expand upon them, placing them within a broader historical and materialist context. He questioned the inherent necessity of the level of repression demanded by Freud's reality principle. Was this level of repression truly a universal requirement for human survival, or was it, perhaps, a contingent feature of specific historical formations, particularly the capitalist mode of production? Central to Marcuse's argument was the concept of surplus repression. He distinguished between the basic repression, an unavoidable aspect of any societal structure, and the surplus repression, a layer of additional constraints imposed by specific social and economic systems to maintain their dominance. This surplus repression, according to Marcuse, was not a necessary condition for civilization. Rather, it was a tool of power, a means of controlling and subjugating the populace. This surplus did not merely constrain instinctual drives. It actively shaped and molded them, ensuring their conformity to the prevailing social order. Further refining his argument, Marcuse introduced the performance principle. This concept evolved from Freud's reality principle, but it carried a distinctly historical and materialist inflection. The performance principle, Marcuse argued, demanded ever-increasing levels of productivity and efficiency, a relentless striving for achievement that served the interests of capitalism. This relentless pursuit of productivity, or from being a neutral aspect of social organization, became a primary mechanism of control, shaping individual desires and aspirations to conform to the demands of the system. The elegance of Marcuse's argument lies in its ability to connect the seemingly disparate realms of the individual psyche and the larger social structures. He did not treat the human being as an isolated entity, but rather as a product of specific historical circumstances. The individual's inner world, therefore, was not simply a matter of individual psychology, but a reflection of the social forces that shaped it. To illustrate his points, Marcuse drew upon classical myths, such as the narratives of Narcissus and Orpheus. He interpreted these myths not as mere literary artifacts, but as symbolic expressions of the potential for non-repressive libidinal order, a state where the fulfillment of human desires was not seen as inherently antagonistic to societal needs. These interpretations provided powerful counterpoints to the Freudian view of civilization as inherently repressive, suggesting the possibility of a different path a civilization characterized by harmony between individual fulfillment and social organization. The intellectual lineage of Eros and Civilization is clear. Freud's metapsychology, especially Civilization and its discontents, provided the primary framework for Marcuse's critique. However, Marcuse's work was not a mere rehash of Freudian ideas. It was a transformative synthesis, infusing Freud's insights with a Marxist understanding of historical materialism and societal structures. Furthermore, the influence of Friedrich Schiller's on the aesthetic education of man is evident in Marcuse's emphasis on play and aesthetics as crucial elements in reconciling the demands of reason and the fulfillment of human desires. Schiller's work provided a crucial philosophical underpinning for Marcuse's vision of a non-repressive civilization. The impact of Eros and Civilization was profound and far-reaching. It provided a theoretical framework for the burgeoning counterculture movements of the 1960s, offering a powerful justification for the rejection of the prevailing work ethic and the pursuit of sexual liberation. Thinkers like Norman O. Brown, in his influential work Life Against Death, directly engaged with Marcuse's ideas, expanding upon his concepts and applying them to a range of social and political issues. Moreover, Marcuse's work influenced radical therapists and educational reformers who sought to create social institutions that fostered individual growth and self-expression rather than conformity and repression. The book's enduring legacy lies in its ability to connect individual psychology with the realities of social and political structures, offering a powerful vision of human emancipation. It remains a potent testament to the power of critical theory to illuminate the complexities of the human condition and to inspire movements for social change. Marcuse's intellectual journey took a significant turn with the publication of One-Dimensional Man in 1964, a work that cemented his place as a leading critical theorist and offered a profoundly pessimistic diagnosis of advanced industrial society. This book grappled with the central question: how could Western societies, characterized by unprecedented levels of affluence and apparent freedoms, paradoxically exhibit such pervasive social control and a seeming absence of revolutionary potential? The traditional Marxist expectation of a proletariat ripe for revolution appeared increasingly untenable in the face of post-war consumerism and the seemingly seamless integration of the working class into the capitalist system. The problem, as Marcuse saw it, stemmed from a novel form of domination operating through the very mechanisms of satisfaction. He termed this phenomenon repressive sublimation, in contrast to the overt repression of instinctual drives characteristic of earlier capitalist formations. Advanced industrial society, according to Marcuse, allowed for a carefully managed and commodified release of these drives. Consumer culture, mass media, and the pervasive sexualization of advertising served as channels for instinctual gratification, but these channels ultimately reinforced the existing social order. The system permitted, even encouraged, a certain degree of libidinal expression, but only within boundaries that posed no threat to its stability. This engineered permissiveness, this repressive desublimation, effectively neutralized critical consciousness by blurring the lines between genuine liberation and manufactured consent. The result, Marcuse argued, was a one-dimensional mode of thought and existence. The second dimension of critical reflection, the capacity to envision and strive for alternative social arrangements, had been systematically eroded. Individuals became trapped within a happy consciousness, content with the superficial satisfactions offered by consumer culture and incapable of recognizing the deeper structures of domination that shape their lives. The ability to critically evaluate the prevailing social order, to perceive its inherent contradictions and injustices, was effectively suppressed by the constant barrage of consumerist propaganda and the illusion of individual freedom. Marcuse's analysis of technological rationality in One-Dimensional Man provides a particularly insightful example of this process. He contended that the very logic of science and technology, when applied to social organization, became an instrument of domination. The relentless pursuit of efficiency, productivity, and technological progress, while seemingly neutral and objective, served to reinforce existing power structures and stifle dissent. Problems were framed as technical challenges requiring technical solutions, thereby precluding any consideration of fundamental social or political change. The focus shifted from questioning the goals of technological development to optimizing the means of achieving those goals, effectively legitimizing the status quo and suppressing alternative visions of social organization. For instance, consider the development of automation in manufacturing. While automation undeniably increased productivity and lowered costs, It also led to widespread job displacement and the de-skilling of labor. Rather than addressing the social consequences of automation, such as unemployment and inequality, the focus remained on maximizing its efficiency and profitability. This technological imperative, Marcuse argued, served to reinforce the power of capital and further integrate workers into a system that ultimately alienated them from their labor. The promise of technological progress became a tool of social control, masking the underlying power dynamics and preventing meaningful social transformation. The intellectual roots of one-dimensional man can be traced to several key sources. Max Weber's theory of rationalization and the iron cage of bureaucracy provided a crucial framework for understanding the increasing dominance of instrumental reason in modern society. Adorno and Horkheimer's dialectic of enlightenment offered a powerful critique of the culture industry and its role in shaping consciousness and suppressing critical thought. Marcuse drew upon these intellectual traditions to develop his own unique analysis of advanced industrial society, combining insights from Marxism, psychoanalysis, and critical theory to create a compelling and unsettling portrait of contemporary social life. The contemporary relevance of Marcuse's critique is striking. His analysis of repressive sublimation and one-dimensionality resonates strongly with current debates about social media, platform capitalism, and the gamification of life. Social media platforms, for example, offer seemingly endless opportunities for self-expression and connection, yet they also serve as powerful tools for surveillance, data collection, and the manipulation of opinion. The constant stream of information and entertainment can overwhelm critical faculties, making it difficult to distinguish between genuine sources of knowledge and manufactured propaganda. The pursuit of likes, followers, and online validation can become a form of repressive sublimation, channeling individual desires into predetermined, commercially exploitable forms. Similarly, the gamification of work and education, while intended to increase engagement and motivation, can also serve to reinforce existing power structures and suppress critical thought. By framing tasks as games with rewards and punishments, individuals are encouraged to focus on achieving specific goals within a predefined system, rather than questioning the goals themselves or the system as a whole. This can lead to a form of one-dimensionality, where individuals become so focused on playing the game that they lose sight of the larger social and political context. One-dimensional man had a profound impact on the New Left and subsequent generations of critical thinkers. It became a canonical text for student activists and intellectuals around the world, providing a theoretical framework for understanding the seemingly intractable problems of advanced industrial society. Figures like Rudi Dutschke in Germany were directly influenced by Marcuse's analysis, adopting his critique of repressive tolerance and his call for a great refusal of the existing social order. The Students for a Democratic Society in the United States also drew heavily on Marcuse's ideas, incorporating his critique of consumerism and technological rationality into their platform for social change. Moreover, one-dimensional man shaped the work of media theorists and critics of consumer culture for decades. Thinkers like Douglas, Kellner, and Henry Dyer built upon Marcuse's analysis to develop more nuanced understandings of the role of media in shaping consciousness and reinforcing social inequalities. These scholars explore the ways in which television, film, and other forms of mass media contribute to the one-dimensional character of contemporary life, promoting consumerism, conformity, and a passive acceptance of the status quo. Marcuse's work provided a crucial foundation for these critical analyses, offering a powerful framework for understanding the complex relationship between media, technology, and social power. The intellectual terrain shaped by one-dimensional man was vast, yet it presented a profound and urgent political question. If the advanced industrial world had so thoroughly integrated its working class, pacifying dissent through the comforts of consumerism, from which quarter could any meaningful opposition arise? The very totality of the system Marcuse described seemed to foreclose the possibility of its own negation. This challenge demanded a new map of revolutionary potential, a search for agents of change existing outside the cycle of production and consumption that define the life of the one-dimensional citizen. Marcuse's response was a concept that would electrify the burgeoning counterculture and student movements of the 1960s, the idea of the Great Refusal. This was his theoretical pivot away from the classical Marxist proletariat. The Great Refusal was a call for a radical break, a complete rejection of the affluent society's principles, values, and institutions. The agents of this refusal were to be found among the system's outcasts and outsiders. He identified these new subjects of historical change in the substratum of the marginalized, including racial and ethnic minorities, the chronically unemployed, and the exploited populations of the developing world. He also saw immense potential in the radical intelligentsia and the university students who, despite their relative privilege, were uniquely positioned to recognize and critique the irrationality of the supposedly rational society. These groups, unassimilated or only partially assimilated into the happy consciousness, retained a connection to a more fundamental human need for freedom, a need that the managed society could suppress but never fully extinguish. The genesis of this idea lay in the palpable political events of the era. The American Civil Rights Movement and the global anti-colonial struggles provided living proof of constituencies whose experiences of oppression gave them a perspective unavailable to the contented majority. This formulation, however, gave rise to a second, more complex problem. How could such a refusal gain traction within the framework of a liberal democracy that celebrated tolerance as its highest virtue? This led Marcuse to his most controversial and perhaps most misunderstood work, the 1965 essay titled Repressive Tolerance. Here, he confronted the paradox at the heart of liberal thought. He argued that in a society with deeply embedded structural inequalities, the practice of indiscriminate tolerance becomes a tool of the powerful, granting an equal platform to all ideas, both those that advance human liberation and those that promote oppression, serves to maintain the status quo. The discourse of reason is neutralized, and radical alternatives are domesticated, reduced to one more opinion, in a marketplace of ideas where the dominant ideology always holds the advantage. The essay posits that a purely abstract or passive tolerance allows for the flourishing of systemic repression. His proposed solution was a concept of liberating or discriminating tolerance. This was the argument that a truly humane society would need to practice intolerance toward movements, policies, and forms of speech that are demonstrably aggressive, oppressive, or destructive. It would mean actively fostering and protecting subversive, radical, and oppositional discourses from the left while withdrawing tolerance from organized movements on the right. This was a direct challenge to the procedural neutrality of liberal governance, suggesting that the goal of human freedom superseded the abstract principle of universal toleration. The work was explosive, immediately placing Marcuse at the center of fierce debates about academic freedom, free speech, and the very nature of democratic society. The most potent living embodiment of Marcuse's search for a new revolutionary subject was found in his own student at the University of California, San Diego, Angela Y. Davis. His mentorship of Davis was a profound intellectual partnership. Her doctoral work, which he supervised, explored the philosophical underpinnings of violence and liberation, and her subsequent career as an activist and scholar became a powerful application of Marcusean theory. Davis's focus on the intersection of race, class, and gender, and her pioneering analysis of the prison industrial complex directly extended Marcuse's identification of marginalized communities as the locus of revolutionary consciousness. Her work gave concrete, American-specific form to his more abstract, European-derived philosophy, demonstrating how the great refusal could be articulated by those whom the system had most brutally excluded. Marcuse's influence extended across the Atlantic, shaping the strategies of the European New Left. In Germany, he maintained a close intellectual relationship with Rudi Dutschke, a leading figure in the German Socialist Students' Union. It was Dutschke who, inspired by Marcuse and the Italian theorist Antonio Gramsci, popularized the strategy of the long march through the institutions. This was a vision of radical change achieved by progressively transforming society from within, infiltrating and altering the character of its core institutions like universities, the media, and government agencies. This represented a practical, strategic application of Marcuse's critical theory, moving from pure critique to a program for political action. Marcuse's own public engagement peaked during this period. His presence at the student uprisings in Paris in May 1968 and his speeches at universities across the United States and Europe solidified his status as a philosophical guide for a generation in revolt. This level of direct political engagement inevitably provoked a powerful backlash. The concept of repressive tolerance, in particular, was seized upon by critics as evidence of a totalitarian impulse within the New Left. The most formidable of these critics was the then governor of California, Ronald Reagan. Reagan and other conservatives targeted Marcuse directly, portraying him as a corrupting influence on the youth and a threat to American values. There was a concerted political campaign, fueled by the American Legion and other groups, to have Marcuse fired from his teaching position at UXT. The university ultimately defended his academic freedom, but the episode was a stark demonstration of his real-world impact. His ideas were considered dangerous enough by the political establishment to warrant a direct attempt at suppression, proving, in a deeply ironic way, his own thesis about the limits of tolerance when faced with a genuine challenge to power. The controversy moved his philosophy from the seminar room into the sphere of public political struggle, confirming his role as a public intellectual whose work had tangible and immediate consequences. The fervent hopes of the late 1960s, however, began to wane with the political defeats and internal fragmentation of the New Left in the 1970s. The Great Refusal, while a powerful mobilizing idea, appeared insufficient to overturn the deeply entrenched structures of one-dimensional society. The system proved more resilient, more capable of absorbing and deflecting dissent than perhaps even Marcuse had anticipated. This period of political disillusionment would compel him to once again shift his analytic focus. If a political and social revolution was foreclosed for the moment, he began to ask where the memory of freedom and the promise of a different reality could be preserved. This inquiry would lead him toward a profound re-engagement with the power of art, searching for a form of transcendence in the aesthetic dimension itself. Marcuse's intellectual journey, culminating in his late work, presents a compelling narrative of adaptation and persistent inquiry. The vibrant optimism of his earlier writings, fueled by the burgeoning counterculture movements, gradually gave way to a more nuanced, even somber, assessment of the enduring power of established societal structures. The revolutionary fervor of the 1960s, with its promise of radical social transformation, yielded to the sobering realities of political setbacks and the system's remarkable capacity for self-preservation. This shift in the political landscape prompted a corresponding evolution in Marcuse's intellectual focus. His attention turned from the immediate prospects of revolutionary upheaval to the more enduring question of how the ideals of liberation and the memory of a different, more equitable world could be sustained amidst persistent oppression. This crucial transition found its most profound expression in his exploration of the aesthetic dimension. In the aesthetic dimension, published in 1978, Marcuse proposed a significant departure from traditional Marxist aesthetics. He argued against the simplistic view of art as mere political propaganda, asserting instead that art's transformative potential resides primarily in its inherent formal qualities, in its capacity to create a separate realm of experience governed by laws distinct from those of the dominant reality. This separate dimension is not a mere escape. Rather, it functions as a powerful critique of the existing order. By presenting a world structured according to principles of beauty, harmony, and form, art implicitly challenges the prevailing social and political arrangements. This conceptual framework draws heavily on Immanuel Kant's critique of judgment, particularly Kant's emphasis on the autonomy of the aesthetic experience. Marcuse's lifelong engagement with the philosophy of Friedrich Schiller is also evident here. Schiller's concept of aesthetic education, which posits the transformative power of art to cultivate a harmonious balance between reason and sensibility, profoundly shaped Marcuse's understanding of art's role in social and political transformation. The influence of these thinkers is not merely incidental. It provides the intellectual bedrock upon which Marcuse constructs his theory of the aesthetic dimension. Marcuse's analysis of specific works of art further elucidates his argument. His interpretation of the writings of Samuel Beckett and Franz Kafka serves as a prime example. He viewed their depictions of a fragmented, seemingly meaningless world not as expressions of nihilism, but as powerful indictments of the pervasive unfreedom of the dominant social order. The aesthetic strategies employed by these authors, the creation of a sense of alienation, the disruption of conventional narrative structures, function as potent critiques of the existing reality, achieved through a deliberate process of the aesthetic estrangement. The disorientation and unease evoked by their works, according to Marcuse, serve to highlight the limitations and constraints imposed by the prevailing social system, thereby prompting a critical reflection on the nature of freedom and oppression. The immediate impact of the aesthetic dimension was perhaps less dramatic than that of his earlier works, which directly engaged with the political controversies of their time. However, the book's enduring legacy lies in its profound and enduring contribution to the field of critical theory. It broadened the scope of Marxist aesthetics, moving beyond a purely instrumental view of art and recognizing its intrinsic capacity for social critique. Subsequent scholars have built upon Marcuse's insights, exploring the multifaceted ways in which art can challenge dominant ideologies and preserve utopian impulses. The concept of aesthetic estrangement, for instance, has become a valuable tool for analyzing the ways in which art can disrupt conventional perceptions and foster critical consciousness. Critiques of Marcuse's aesthetic theory have centered primarily on the potential for elitism inherent in emphasizing the autonomy of art. Some critics have argued that focusing on the formal qualities of art risks neglecting its social and political content, potentially overlooking the ways in which art can directly engage with and challenge specific forms of oppression. These critiques, however, do not invalidate the core tenets of Marcuse's argument. Rather, they highlight the need for nuanced understanding of the complex relationship between art's formal properties and its social and political significance. His work encourages a more thorough examination of both aspects, recognizing the interplay between the aesthetic experience and critical consciousness. In conclusion, Marcuse's intellectual project, viewed in its entirety, represents a persistent exploration of the possibilities of transcendence within the seemingly closed universe of late capitalism. His relevance today resides not primarily in his pronouncements on the imminence of specific revolutionary upheavals, but in his profound analysis of the mechanisms of recuperation to process by which capitalist systems absorb and neutralize dissent. His concepts of repressive desublimation and the happy consciousness remain remarkably insightful tools for understanding the cultural logic of the 21st century. From the seemingly progressive initiatives of corporate social responsibility to the subtle, algorithmic manipulation of our desires, Marcuse's frameworks offer a powerful lens for critical analysis. His final turn toward aesthetics provides a sober, yet not entirely despairing, vision of how critical consciousness might find refuge and continue to exert its influence, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. His work stands as a testament to the enduring power of critical thought in the face of overwhelming societal pressures.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.